You're listening to Hoedown History, where we explore the history and legends of America's old-time and bluegrass music.
You get a line, I'll get a pull, honey. You get a line, I'll get a pull, baby. You get a line, I'll get a pull. We'll go down to the Crawdad hole, honey, baby mine.
It's a classic American folk song that pretty much everyone knows of today. It's a simple and versatile melody that has worked its way into many different genres of American music. You can find recordings of the Crawdad Song everywhere, from old-time string band music to folk, blues, western swing, bluegrass, rockabilly, jazz, and even British soccer terrace chants. But where did it actually come from? And what even is a crawdad hole anyway? Well, stick around because we're going to answer those questions. I will warn you that this is a tune that is surrounded by a bit of debate over its origins. And the Crawdad Song is one of those melodies with a very, very big family tree of related songs. I'll share some of them with you, and you might just be a bit surprised to find out some of these tunes you've known for years are just basically the Crawdad Song, just with different lyrics. And stick around until the end, because I'll play a version of a tune that might just be the ultimate source of the Crawdad Song, and it's over 500 years old. This is one you have to hear, so let's dive in.
You get a line, I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line, I'll get a pole, babe. Where you going, boy? You get a line, I'll get a pole. You go down to the Crawdad hole, honey, baby mine. Get up.
You're listening to one of the earliest recordings of the Crawdad Song that was made by the Lone Star Cowboys, who recorded it in 1933. As you can hear, the Lone Star Cowboys were a western swing band, which formed in 1929 by Horace Leon Chapalear. While Chapalear is considered one of the pioneers of western swing music, he is kind of forgotten of today. But his recordings contain this fascinating example of that early blend of hillbilly, jazz, and the blues. He was born in Gilmer, Texas in 1909, and in 1929 he teamed up with the brothers Joe and Bob Shelton to form the Lone Star Cowboys. After launching their career in Tyler, Texas, they played on a local radio station before they relocated to Shreveport, Louisiana, where they signed to station KWKH. In 1933, the singer, Jimmy Davis, joined the band on a session for Bluebird. Davis had a great voice and helped land the Lone Star Cowboys a deal with Victor, resulting in some classic early western swing sides like Deep Elm Blues and Just Because. But just 2 years after this recording, tragedy struck when, returning from a gig one night, the vehicle carrying Chapalear crashed, and he was hospitalized with a severe injury to the head. Although he survived the accident, it appears that he never fully recovered from it, because after the accident, Chapalear's behavior became a bit erratic, and his reliability as a professional suffered, so much so that the record label he was signed to eventually terminated the band's contract. During the 1940s, Chapalear left the music business altogether and got a job working as a policeman. But that didn't work out too well either, because he was eventually convicted of accepting bribes. And we don't know for sure, but he possibly may have received a prison sentence for this. He would eventually go on to re-enter the music world again and cut a number of records in the 40s and 50s. But after Capitol Records terminated his contract in the mid-50s, he quit the music business again and just got a job working at a local dog kennel. As time went on, the health problems resulting from his previous accident led to a condition of severe depression. And in 1962, following a visit to his sister in Texas, Chapalear committed suicide. While Chapalear appears to be one of the first musicians to make a recording of the tune with the actual title of the Crawdad Song, there were earlier recordings of the melody itself with different lyrics, recorded under different names. And the melody does turn up repeatedly in a host of early hillbilly records of the 30s. Here's a 1936 recording by Jack Moser and his Oklahoma Cavaliers, made 3 years after Chapalear's Crawdad Song, and this one is entitled Going Round and Round This World. See if you can make out any similarity to the melody of the Crawdad Song.
Going round, round this world, baby mine. Going round, round this world, baby mine. Going round this world with a guitar playing girl. Going round this world, baby mine. Right out, Fred boy.
Some of my listeners will recognize another tune with similar lyrics that goes by Banjo, Pickin, Girl, which is another related song in the Crawdad tree of tunes. Just several years later, after Moser's recording, we find another legendary version of the Crawdad Song. This one is a bit different. It was recorded by Mrs. Vernon Allen in 1940. It was a field recording made in Schaffner, California, at a labor camp that was established by the Farm Security Administration in the 1930s. This camp was set up to provide basic housing and services for people from Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas who were left completely destitute during the Dust Bowl. And I just love this version. It's kind of like a blend between a play party song and an old English ballad, with this playful but also very heartfelt feel to it.
This is a Crawdad song. Wake up, honey, you've slept too late. Bing, boo. Wake up, honey, you've slept too late. Crawdad man done pass your gate. Bing, bing, boo, bing, 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 boo. The old duck hen said to the drake, bing, boo. The old duck hen said to the drake, no more crawdads in this lake. Bing, bing, boo, bing, 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 boo.
You'll notice the sound of deep-throated vocal effects in this version, and it is a great example of how this tune was used as a play party song. Like Old Joe Clark and Boiled 'em Cabbage Down, the Crawdad Song was a very popular play party number throughout the South and West when instruments weren't allowed or available for the youth at the time. And we'll get back to these strange sound effects later because they might also contain some interesting historical roots. The tune would continue to be recorded by countless musicians throughout the 40s and 50s. But one of the biggest reasons for its popularity in the bluegrass world is attributed to Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs with the Foggy Mountain Boys, who recorded the tune in 1959. Here's a performance of the band from the Grand Ole Opry Show from 1962. And what can I say about this one? Earl kicks this one off with a captivating break, setting it up for some of the other Foggy Mountain Boys to shine on this one.
You get a line and I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line and I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line and I'll get a pole. We'll go down to the Crawdad hole, honey, baby mine. Yonder comes the man.
And speaking of bluegrass, the melody shows up again repeatedly in this genre under a couple different titles, including Mama Don't Allow.
Mama don't allow no music played around here. Mama don't allow no music around here. We don't care what Mama don't allow. Gonna play that music anyhow. Mama don't allow no music played around here.
This tune even turns up in the jazz world too, with a pretty great swing version by Connie Boswell in 1936. For some reason, it took me a while to make the connection to another bluegrass and old-time tune that shares the same melody. It was a title made popular by Grandpa Jones called How Many Biscuits Can You Eat? This title was first recorded by Dr. Humphrey Bate and his Possum Hunters way back in 1928. See if you can make out the melody to the Crawdad Song on this one.
Oh, how many biscuits can you eat this morning, this morning? Oh, how many biscuits can you eat this morning, this morning? Oh, how many biscuits can you eat? 44 biscuits and a ham of meat this morning. So breakfast, so soon.
These are just a sample of tunes in the Crawdad tree. Too many to play them all. But before we dive into the source of our tune, we should probably discuss what a crawdad hole even is, because if you're like me and crawdad fishing wasn't one of your childhood activities, you have no idea what the song is even about. And it's kind of cool. These little critters go by several different names depending on what region you're from, including mudbugs, crawfish, crayfish, crawlfish, crawdaddies, and of course crawdads. These little guys live in holes they dig in the ground, piling up the mud above it into what looks like a chimney. These holes can be pretty big, sometimes up to 2 to 3 feet deep or more. They dig down there for safety, but mostly to get to some water. While they can breathe outside of water, they have to stay moist to survive for long. Now, catching a crawdad in a crawdad hole takes a certain patience and skill. Of course, you can use a line and pole, as the song suggests, or simply a long weed stem or a green onion stalk. Once you put your bait on one end, sometimes a hot dog or a piece of bacon, you slip it gently down the hole. Sooner or later, the crawdad either attacks the bait as food or just gets mad at it and snaps at it with its pincer. When you feel the nudge on the line, you quickly pull it up, and the crawfish comes with it before he thinks to let go. So, glad I could clear up the mystery of the crawdad hole for some of you folks. While the Lone Star Cowboys made their recording of the crawdad hole in 1933, it's not actually our earliest recording with that title, as it appears that there was one made 3 years previously, in 1930, by these guys. A rather obscure pair of vaudeville musicians by the name of Honey Boy and Sassafras. However, I wasn't able to find this version online anywhere, but there are even earlier recordings under different titles that share the same basic melody, and that make researching the history of this tune a bit tricky. One was recorded in 1927 by the Carolina Tar Heels under the title There Ain't No Use Workin' So Hard. And another version of the melody was recorded by Doc Walsh in 1926 under the title Going Back to Jericho. But our earliest version of the melody is actually a pretty important one in the history of American music as a whole, and it helps shed some light on the source. It was recorded by one Ben Harney way back in 1925. While the melody is clearly that of the Crawdad Song, the lyrics are a bit different, as well as the title. It was dubbed, "You've Been a Good Old Wagon, but You Done Broke Down." I'll play it in a bit, but first, we need to discuss why this recording has fascinated music historians for decades. Ben Harney was born in 1872. While not a household name today, he was a songwriter, entertainer, and a pioneer of ragtime music. He published this tune way back in 1895, and it's not only our first documented source of the crawdad melody, it's also considered by many historians to be the first ragtime composition to ever be published, as well as one of the first-time ragtime hits to reach a wide audience. In 1924, the New York Times wrote that Ben Harney, quote, probably did more to popularize ragtime than any other person. For a time, there was a bit of uncertainty regarding Harney's life. He's generally said to have been born in Louisville, Kentucky, although some sources put his birthplace in Nashville, and some other sources claim he was born in Memphis. So here's Ben Harney performing You've Been a Good Old Wagon, But You've Done Broke Down, from 1925.
Well, jumped on the dummy, didn't have no fare this morning. Jumped on the dummy, didn't have no fare this morning. Jumped on the dummy, didn't have nowhere. Went around the circle, didn't get nowhere this morning, this evening. Standing on the corner, wasn't doing no harm this morning. Standing on the corner, wasn't doing no harm this morning. Standing on the corner, wasn't doing no harm when the copper grabbed me by my arm this morning.
Okay, so a couple of things here. I know some of you are thinking this sounds more like the blues than a rag, and we'll get to that. Also interesting to note, if you simply listen to the vocals, it does sound like Harney is African American. In the past, many believed and claimed that Harney was black, but later research revealed and confirmed that Harney was in fact white. Early in his career, he did play with various African American theater groups, where he may have picked up and copied this vocal effect. But he sure fooled a lot of people who simply listened to his records. Harney passed in 1928 from a heart attack, just 3 years after making this recording, and since then his composition has been a source of some debate. While many music researchers attribute his piece as the first rag composition, some consider it a blues number. I know, I was a bit confused when I first heard it because, to my modern ears, it does sound like a straight-up blues number. And I wasn't the only one. In fact, one of the most popular theories of the Crawdad Song out there is that it may have evolved from both Anglo-American play party traditions and African-American blues. Some going so far as to claim that the song was first sung by workers in the South who built the levees along the Mississippi River. It may be true, but I wasn't actually able to pull up any firm research to support this popular claim. And the more I started digging into the source of our tune, the only early documentation I was able to find kind of left me with more questions. As I mentioned, our earliest documented reference to the tune goes back to 1895 with Ben Harney's publication, but our tune also turns up a bit later in time in this book, the Frank C. Brown Folk Collection from North Carolina, which gathered the folk music of people in the rural North Carolina area during the 1920s and 30s. The authors found at least 4 songs which have elements of either verse or melody structure, which are very similar to our Wagon tune and Crawdad songs. Could these tunes predate Harney's publication? While most of the tunes collected in this book are old folk songs that had been performed by generations, we don't really know with any certainty how far back they go. Of course, because Harney published his song in 1895 and performed it frequently for the next 30 years, it is quite possible that at least some, if not all, of the folk songs collected in this book may just in fact reflect the popularity of Harney's song and may not go back any further than that, which kind of just left me scratching my head. But there is one researcher who did a deep dive into our tune. The Crawdad Song turns up in an article found in the Journal of American Music entitled Ben Harney, The Middlesboro Years, 1890 to 93. It was written by William Talmage, a professor from the State University of New York. In the article, he refers to the Crawdad Song as, quote, an African-American folk blues song. He even references John and Alan Lomax, who themselves used the term, quote, Negro blues in describing the origin of the song. The article goes on to suggest that Harney might have used an existing African-American blues song before composing a ragtime version of it in his publication. And for many people, this seemed the accepted theory, as the Crawdad Song does sound like a typical blues song. But here's the thing. While the Crawdad Song does sound like the blues to our modern ears, this may not be correct. Some historians of the early blues claim that the Crawdad Song, or in this case Harney's Wagon song, may not actually be a blues song at all, and in fact may be older than the blues genre that came a bit later. And there is a case to be made here. When the early blues researcher W.C. Handy discussed what the early blues sounded like, he very rarely brought up songs that sounded like the Crawdad Song, because early blues music was thought of as a bit different to what we think of the blues today. It sounded more like this.
They tell me Joe Turner's come and gone, oh Lordy. Tell me Joe Turner's come and gone, oh Lordy. Got my man, I'm gone.
So maybe the Lomaxes are wrong, and our early source of the Crawdad Song is not from the blues tradition at all, but rather just a rag song from the 1890s, one that Harney popularized himself. But whether or not the Crawdad Song finds its origins in the blues, the even bigger question remains. Where did Harney get this song from? Did he compose it out of thin air, or did he borrow it from some earlier source? Answering this question is a bit tricky, and some have made theories, but there is a strong likelihood that it may have its roots in an earlier folk tune of the time, because there does happen to be a much, much earlier folk tune that does sound remarkably similar to our Crawdad song. It's an old Scottish song entitled Frog Went a Courtin'. While this title has many different versions, we do know that this song made its way into the American folk tradition, and versions have been performed by some pretty big names over the years, including Doc Watson, Pete Seeger, and Tex Ritter. It's a very, very old tune. We can trace its roots to as far back as the 1500s. It was first recorded in written text in 1548 and was believed to be a satirical political ballad of the time. It's debatable, but many historians suggest that the original frog of this tune was actually referring to the French Prince Francis, or later Francois, Duke of Anjou, and the Miss Mouse was Queen Elizabeth. I was able to find a version of this old tune as performed by the Scottish ballad singer Duncan Williamson that you have to hear. Williamson was a Scottish ballad singer who collected many of these old ballads and folk stories from across Scotland. He was born in 1928 in a tent on the shores of Loch Fyne in Argyll. He was one of 16 children. Although he was primarily known for his vast repertoire of traditional tales and storytelling, Duncan also had a significant repertoire of songs that he picked up from other travelers while working as a stonemason. You'll notice that Williamson will sing out a certain refrain after each verse, and if you remember Mrs. Vernon Allen's version of the Crawdad song, she too made similar sounds after each verse as well. I was able to find a theory on what's going on here. These non-lyrical vocalizations in between the storylines may be an imitation of the sound of a spinning wheel, because in the song, Mrs. Mouse is spinning yarn when Froggy arrives on the scene. I don't know for sure if that's what's going on, but it is an interesting theory. So, here's Duncan Williamson performing The Mouse's Wedding to the Frog. It was recorded in the 1980s, and his performance is just great. He has that dynamic and captivating performance style that just carries you away to a different place and time. See if you can make out the melody of the Crawdad song on this old tune, as this just might be our ultimate source. Well, folks, hope you enjoyed this one, and thanks for listening.
A froggy would a woo and ride oh. A froggy would a woo and ride with sword and buckle by his side oh. Oh, first he came to a mouse's den oh. First he came to a mouse's den. He said, Miss Mouse, will you let me in oh. So he took Miss Mousey on his knee oh. He took Miss Mousey on his knee. He said, Miss Mouse, will you marry me oh. She said, where will the man